Ladies and gentlemen, I greet you with a truth that demands your full attention. There are places in life that we are not just encouraged to avoid. They are forbidden zones for the soul. These are not just physical places, but mental, emotional, and spiritual territories. They appear tempting, they look reasonable, they feel urgent, but they are traps. And today I want to warn you with urgency in my voice and love in my heart. Avoid going here. Now I know what you're thinking. Where is here? What place is so dangerous that I must turn back before I ever step foot? Let me tell you, here is not just a location, it is a mindset, it is a decision. It is a posture of the heart that leads to destruction. There are destinations in life that come dressed in opportunity, but are wrapped in compromise. They are decorated with pleasure, but end in regret. They shine with attraction, but conceal the stench of spiritual decay. The greatest mistake you can make is thinking that just because a door is open, you should walk through it. Some doors are traps, not entrances. Some paths are detours, not destinations. And some environments are designed to kill your vision, your discipline, and your purpose. Avoid going where God didn't send you. Just because it's popular doesn't mean it's right. Just because it's crowded doesn't mean it's blessed. And just because it's easy doesn't mean it's fruitful. Don't let excitement lead you where discernment should have stopped you. You must learn to identify environments that are beneath your calling. Not every room deserves your presence. Not every relationship deserves your energy. Not every conversation deserves your voice. Some things must be left alone, not because you're better than them, but because you're too focused to be distracted by them. The most dangerous place you can go is where your character cannot sustain you, where your identity is compromised, and where your purpose is muted. That place, whether it be a job, a relationship, a group, or even an ideology, and become the graveyard of destiny. And let me tell you, purpose can be lost not in one loud moment, but in a series of small compromises. Some of you are on the edge right now, emotionally, financially, spiritually. You're being pulled toward a path that looks like progress but smells like compromise. A shortcut to success, but at the cost of your integrity. A fast escape from pain, but into bondage. A new opportunity, but one that demands your silence where you should speak, and your agreement where you should resist. Avoid going there. Avoid going to that emotional space of bitterness. Avoid going into envy, into self, hate, into victimhood. Avoid going back to what God delivered you from, those habits, those places, those people. Some places are beneath your healing. Some environments are below your resurrection. Going back would be like returning to a prison after being pardoned. I speak this with urgency. Your future is too valuable to waste it in dead places. Your calling is too holy to compromise it in unclean territory. Your influence is too important to dilute it with foolishness. You cannot afford to go where your soul cannot breathe, where your spirit cannot grow, and where your vision cannot expand. Listen, life is not just about movement, it's about direction. Progress is not just going somewhere, it's going the right way. And purpose is not found in activity, but in alignment. There is a place you are assigned to go, and anything outside of that is a detour, a delay, or a disaster. So today I sound the alarm. Avoid going here. Avoid going into partnerships without purpose. Avoid going into rooms where God is not present. Avoid going into success without submission. Avoid going into influence without intimacy with the source. You were born to rise, not just socially or economically, but spiritually and eternally. Every step must honor the one who formed you. Every decision must preserve your design, and every journey must reflect your destiny. Do not be deceived by open doors, smooth paths, or loud applause. Not all opportunities come from heaven, and not all movement is progress. Choose your next step wisely, because where you go determines who you become. The first place you must avoid going is the territory of compromise. Compromise is never loud, never abrupt. It doesn't show up with sirens and red flags. It enters your life quietly, politely. It looks like wisdom. It sounds like flexibility. It feels like progress. But in truth, It is the slow erosion of conviction, one decision at a time. It does not ask for everything. It asks for just enough to make you feel like you haven't changed. Just a slight bending of your standards, just one exception, one adjustment, one secret. That's all it takes to begin a journey away from truth. You think you're managing it, but you're being molded by it. You see, compromise is the silent architect of destruction. It builds monuments of failure on foundations of justification. It starts with telling yourself it's not a big deal. But what starts as a small allowance becomes a lifestyle. The danger is not in the single act, but in the new standard you set. Every time you violate your values to fit in, to be liked, to feel secure, you chip away at the strength of who you are. You become weaker in resolve and softer in conscience, and eventually your original convictions are a memory rather than a guide. Many people have lost their identity not through rebellion, but through subtle agreement. They didn't choose a new direction. They accepted one. They didn't walk boldly into wrong. They drifted there through tolerated decisions. And when you tolerate what should be rejected, you become what you once resisted. Compromise works slowly because its power is in normalizing the very thing you once swore you'd never do. And let us be honest, compromise is usually attractive. It presents itself as the path of peace, the easy way out, the more mature option. It sounds like diplomacy, but it functions as betrayal, not betrayal of others, but betrayal of your calling, your integrity, and your future. It teaches you to say yes to what should be a firm no. It teaches you to quiet your inner conviction for the sake of external comfort. And when that becomes a pattern, you lose the voice of clarity inside of you. Avoid going to that place, that spiritual no man's land where your standards start to dissolve in the name of progress. Do not call it growth when it's really decay. Do not call it adaptation when it's really abandonment. There's a difference between being flexible and being double-minded. Growth does not require you to kill your values. It requires you to live them more fully. Maturity is not a softening of your morals, but a strengthening of your wisdom. Some people find themselves stuck in relationships, careers, communities, even ministries, not because they didn't have the strength to say no, but because they said yes to one small compromise. They lowered the bar just once, thinking they'd return to their standards later. But compromise doesn't offer return tickets. It takes you further than you planned to go, keeps you longer than you intended to stay, and costs more than you were willing to pay. Avoid the temptation to silence your conscience just to keep peace with people. You were not born to agree with everything. You were not designed to fit into every room. Some people will only accept you when you tone down your light. Don't do it. The moment you dim your light to comfort others, you lose the clarity that guided you. The fire in your spirit will begin to flicker. The passion that fueled your purpose will begin to fade. And eventually you'll forget what it felt like to be fully alive in truth. The compromise I speak of is not just moral, it's spiritual. It's the internal negotiation that happens when you begin to question whether standing for what is right is worth it. When you begin to feel that the cost of integrity is too high, when you start looking for shortcuts to blessings that only obedience can unlock, that's when the enemy whispers, just this once, it's not that serious, everyone else is doing it. These phrases are not casual, they are calculated. They are the vocabulary of compromise. If you must lose something, lose comfort. If you must give up something, give up convenience, but never give up your conviction. Never trade your birthright for a moment of validation. Never surrender your inheritance for the applause of the crowd. Avoid going to that emotional and spiritual place where you start negotiating with your conscience. When you reach that space, you're no longer moving toward your destiny, you're drifting into darkness. You must set your heart like flint. You must be unwavering in your standards. This world does not need more agreeable people. It needs those who are unshakable in principle, those who would rather stand alone in truth than be celebrated in compromise. That's what preserves destiny. That's what multiplies favor. That's what carries weight in eternity. So when compromise knocks on your door, don't answer with a debate. Answer with a decision. Answer with a life that says, I refuse to become what I was rescued from. Because every step away from conviction is a step toward confusion. And every time you lower your standard, you reduce your spiritual authority. Avoid going there, because that place, where compromise becomes a lifestyle, is where great men fall, great women settle, and destinies die quietly. The second place you must avoid going is the territory of offense. Offense is a slow poison that doesn't just wound your emotions. It anchors your soul to bitterness. It is not simply being hurt. It is holding on to that hurt until it becomes your identity. Offense convinces you that you are right to stay broken, justified in withholding forgiveness, entitled to remain angry. But what you do not realize is that the longer you hold offense, the less of your future you are able to carry. You must understand that offense is not a wound, it is a trap. It lures you in with the bait of justice, but it cages you in cycles of resentment. It whispers they don't deserve your mercy. It tells you you can't let this go until they say sorry, and so you wait. You wait for an apology that may never come. You wait for someone to acknowledge your pain, but while you wait, your spirit decays. While you wait, your joy withers. While you wait, your destiny stalls. Offense is a thief. It steals clarity, peace, and divine perspective. It blinds you to the present because it chains your mind to a moment in the past. You keep replaying it, what they said, how they did it, what they failed to do. And the more you replay it, the deeper the wound becomes. What should have healed in time now becomes a spiritual infection. And the infection spreads. It contaminates your relationships, your faith, your creativity, even your prayers. There are many people who can't move forward, not because they lack opportunity, but because they carry offense like luggage, and where offense goes, grace cannot flow freely. You cannot be bitter and free at the same time. You cannot walk in the fullness of joy and the chains of resentment simultaneously. At some point you have to choose, do I want revenge or do I want restoration? Do I want to prove a point or do I want peace? Avoid going to that place within where your pain becomes your compass, because offense has a way of reshaping your values. Suddenly everything becomes personal. You interpret correction as attack. You see disagreement as betrayal. You begin to isolate yourself not out of wisdom, but out of fear and pride. You shut down voices sent to help you because they sound like the ones who hurt you. Offense doesn't just alter how you feel, it alters how you perceive reality. And here's the truth. People will hurt you, not maybe, not occasionally. It is inevitable. Some will do it intentionally. Some will do it accidentally. But pain is part of life. What separates the wounded from the wise is not what happens to them. It's what they choose to do with it. Some people take pain and build walls. Others take pain and build altars. Some allow it to harden them. Others allow it to humble them. The difference is whether you choose offense or forgiveness. Offense will tempt you to rehearse your story like a victim. You'll tell it to anyone who will listen. You'll decorate it with details and emotional punctuation. But telling it doesn't heal you. In fact, the more you tell it, the more it embeds itself into your identity. You become that pain. You don't just remember it, you relive it, and your memory becomes a prison cell. Forgiveness, however, is not saying that what happened was right. It is not denying your pain. It is not excusing bad behavior. Forgiveness is simply choosing to no longer allow what they did to control what you do. It is releasing your right to vengeance so you can receive the peace that vengeance cannot give. Forgiveness is not for the other person. It is for your freedom. Avoid going to the place where your heart becomes hardened, because a hardened heart is no longer sensitive to the whisper of God. A hardened heart can hear sermons but never change. A hardened heart can speak truth but live in deception. And nothing hardens the heart faster than unresolved offense. Bitterness turns a spiritual warrior into a wounded critic. It makes you suspicious instead of discerning. It makes you cynical instead of wise. Let it go, not because they asked, not because they deserve it, but because you have somewhere greater to be. You have a purpose too precious to delay. You have a vision too valuable to compromise. Carrying offense is like walking with rocks in your shoes. You'll still move, but you'll never run. And you were born to run, run with purpose, run with freedom, run without being weighed down by what they did. Let your heart be light. Let your hands be clean. Let your mind be clear, because peace is a spiritual weapon. Joy is a strategy, and freedom is your inheritance. Do not give up all of that just to prove a point to someone who's already forgotten what they did to you. Avoid going there, because that place of offense is not a resting place. It's a trap. And the longer you stay there, the further you drift from your future. The third place you must avoid going is anywhere your assignment has expired. There are locations, relationships, roles, and seasons that once served a purpose in your life, but now they no longer carry your name. The danger is not always in going somewhere new. Sometimes the real threat lies in staying somewhere familiar that has lost its grace. What was once a garden can become a grave when you refuse to move in step with divine timing. You must understand, purpose is not stationary, it moves, and so must you. You were never called to pitch your tent in a place that was meant to be temporary. Some seasons are classrooms, not homes. They were never meant to last. They were meant to teach. But when you become emotionally attached to what was only supposed to be transitional, you confuse comfort with calling. And when comfort becomes your compass, you will always settle beneath your destiny. Avoid going back to places that no longer carry God's presence for you. Because when the cloud moves and you stay behind, you turn a once anointed place into a place of frustration. You can still be surrounded by the same people, doing the same things in the same environment, and yet feel dry, disconnected, and restless. That restlessness is not rebellion, it's revelation. It's the spirit within you trying to tell you, you don't belong here anymore. Many people stay in expired places because of loyalty. They confuse faithfulness with stagnation, but there's a difference between being planted and being stuck. When you are planted, you grow. When you're stuck, you decay. There are doors you've already walked through that you're afraid to leave, not because they're good, but because they're known. And fear of the unknown will always tempt you to overstay in places God has already vacated. You must learn to recognize when a season is over. The signs are always there, the grace lifts, the clarity fades, the joy shrinks, the energy to continue dries up, and no matter how much you try to revive it, it won't live again. You can pour in your time, your prayers, your effort, but if it's expired, it won't respond, because God doesn't resurrect assignments He has already replaced. You are not being punished, you are being transitioned. Avoid going to places where your presence is tolerated but your purpose is ignored. You are not an accessory, you are an instrument, and you cannot afford to waste your oil in places that no longer need your anointing. You must have the courage to ask yourself, is this where I still belong, or am I here out of fear? Some stay because of guilt, some stay out of obligation, but none of those are reasons to remain where God is no longer endorsing your presence. Even Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go to the next town, for that is why I came." He understood the power of movement. He didn't let applause keep him in one place. He didn't let need trap him. He didn't let miracles define where he stayed. He moved with purpose. He left towns that celebrated him to reach places that needed him. Why? Because staying in the wrong place can hinder what heaven wants to do next through you. When you stay too long, you start losing your edge. Your vision becomes blurry. Your effectiveness weakens. Your confidence erodes. You start trying to survive what you were once thriving in. You begin to resent the very thing you used to rejoice in. That's not spiritual warfare. That's spiritual expiration. The blessing has moved on. The pillar of fire is ahead of you, but you're still sitting in yesterday's ashes. Avoid the lie that leaving means failure. Some doors must be closed by your own hand. You are not a prisoner. You are not bound to the last place you were blessed. Some places were platforms, not destinations. They were meant to launch you, not limit you. But if you don't move, they will become prisons disguised as familiarity. You must value obedience over attachment, because your destiny is not behind you. It's ahead. What lies ahead may be unfamiliar, but it is prepared. And though you may have to leave the comfortable, what awaits is more fruitful. The harvest is never where the seed was first sown. The harvest is where the seed grows to completion. Trust the shift. Trust the timing, trust the silence that comes after the instruction. When God says move, don't ask how long you'll be gone, don't demand a map, don't delay with emotional negotiations, just move, because your next season won't wait for your comfort zone to catch up. Avoid going back to expired roles, titles, or assignments just because they still bring you some form of recognition. Favor without function is empty. You don't want to be celebrated in a place that no longer stretches you. You don't want to be needed in a room that no longer speaks to your purpose. Better to walk into the unknown with divine backing than remain in the familiar with fading relevance. So ask yourself honestly, what are you still trying to make work that God has already closed? What environment are you trying to breathe in, even though the air is gone? Are you staying out of fear, or are you moving by faith? Avoid going there, because that place may still look alive, but your time there is already dead. The fourth place you must avoid going is the place of isolation. Not solitude for reflection, not the kind that recharges your spirit and draws you into intimacy with God. No, I'm speaking of the kind of isolation that disconnects you from purpose, people, and accountability. It is the quiet place where pride disguises itself as protection, and wounds build walls instead of wisdom. Isolation doesn't happen overnight. It begins when trust is broken, expectations are shattered, or disappointment cuts deep. It whispers, "You're safer alone," and before you know it, you've built a life around your fear of being hurt again. You must understand that isolation is a counterfeit refuge. It feels like control, but it's really captivity. It tells you that you're avoiding pain, but in truth, you're avoiding growth. Because while people can hurt you, they are also the vessels God uses to bless you, correct you, sharpen you, and carry you forward. To cut yourself off from people is to cut yourself off from part of your purpose. You were never meant to walk alone, not in calling, not in healing, not in destiny. Many isolate not because they hate people, but because they've been disappointed by them. A betrayal, a misunderstanding, a rejection that left a scar deeper than words. And so now you hide in plain sight, smiling, functioning, but no longer connected. You don't open your heart. You don't trust their intentions. You don't receive their wisdom. You live guarded but not guided. You are surrounded but not submitted. That is the trap of isolation. You appear strong because no one sees your weakness, but you are slowly crumbling because no one is allowed to carry it with you. Avoid going to that mental space where you start believing that no one understands you, that no one sees what you carry, that no one is worthy of your trust. That is not discernment, that is deception. You are not made to be an island. Even Jesus, the Son of God, chose disciples. He could have walked alone, he could have fulfilled his mission without companions, but he understood the principle: relationship is not weakness. It is alignment. Isolation may feel holy, but in reality it is often a slow rebellion against the way you were designed to thrive. You see, isolation invites the enemy to speak louder. When you're disconnected from wise voices, the wrong voice becomes clearer. In isolation, your wounds start talking, your fears grow legs, your thoughts echo with no accountability, and before long you're not just isolated physically, you're isolated emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. Your imagination starts to exaggerate offenses. Small misunderstandings feel like betrayals. Advice sounds like attack. Conviction feels like condemnation. Why? Because you've left the covering of connection. Some say, "I just need time alone to heal." But true healing doesn't come in hiding. It comes in light. It comes when you allow someone to see you, speak to you, walk with you. Healing needs honesty, and honesty requires community. You cannot be truly seen and still fully isolated. God will always send people to help carry what you cannot carry alone. But if you are determined to walk alone, you will miss the strength that comes from shared burdens. Avoid going to that spiritual desert where you cut yourself off in the name of self-preservation. You may avoid pain for a while, but you'll also avoid progress. You'll stop growing. You'll stop being challenged. You'll stop being sharpened, and a life without challenge becomes a life without change. The rough edges of your character don't get smoothed in silence. They get refined in relationship. Pride will tell you, I don't need anyone. Pain will say, I can't trust anyone. But purpose will always whisper, you weren't made to do this alone. When God calls you to a destiny, He also calls people to walk with you, your tribe, your intercessors, your encouragers, your correctors. Your partners in purpose, and while they may not always be perfect, they are necessary, because destiny is never walked out in isolation. It is always activated through divine connection, and don't confuse visibility with vulnerability. Just because you're seen doesn't mean you're known. You can be in a room and still be alone. You can be in ministry and still isolated. You can be preaching and still broken inside, because isolation is not about geography. It's about the posture of the heart. And a heart that refuses to connect will always stay underfed. It's time to come out of hiding, time to lower the guard around your heart, time to allow trusted voices to see the real you, not the curated version, not the strong exterior, but the real, raw, fragile you. Because the real you is the one that God is after. The real you is the one He wants to restore, but He often sends that restoration through the hands of others. And if you reject the hands, you delay the healing. Avoid going there, that place of inner exile, that space where you silence the voices that were sent to save you, that emotional wilderness where you pretend you're fine while you're drowning inside. Avoid going to that place where independence becomes your idol and isolation becomes your sanctuary, because that place may protect you from people, but it will also separate you from your next breakthrough. The fifth place you must avoid going is the territory of comparison, because comparison is the silent thief of purpose. It doesn't shout like envy, it doesn't rage like jealousy, it quietly creeps in, rewiring your confidence and recalibrating your focus. It takes your eyes off your own lane and seduces you to measure your life by someone else's journey. And the moment you begin to measure yourself by someone else's assignment, you devalue your own. Comparison tells you you're behind. It says you should be where they are. It whispers you're not enough, but what comparison doesn't tell you is that it's lying to you through a filtered lens. You see the success, but not the struggle. You see the platform, but not the price. You see the fruit, but not the pruning. And before long, you're frustrated not because God hasn't been good to you, but because you're too busy wishing you were someone else to appreciate who He made you to be. Avoid going to the place where you begin to resent your own assignment. That happens when you make someone else's progress your point of reference. But let me tell you, destiny is not a race. It's not about who gets there first. It's not about who's ahead or behind. It's about being faithful to what you are called to do. You may not be moving as fast as someone else, but are you moving in obedience? You may not have their following, their platform, their influence, but are you where God placed you? Comparison will make you question God's wisdom. You'll begin to wonder, why did He give them that gift? Why not me? And you start praying not from hunger for your purpose, but from frustration about someone else's. That is not intercession. That's irritation disguised as spirituality, and God doesn't respond to jealousy. He responds to trust. Trust that He didn't make a mistake when He designed your journey. Trust that what He gave you is not small, even if it's not seen. Comparison blinds you to your own progress. You're growing, but you don't see it. You're evolving, but you're too distracted to celebrate it, because you're looking left and right instead of up and within. But your purpose was never meant to be validated by public applause. It was meant to be rooted in divine affirmation. And the danger of comparison is that it will have you chasing platforms that were never assigned to you, all while ignoring the field where your own fruit was meant to grow. Avoid going to that inner place where you begin to compete with people you were meant to celebrate. That's what comparison does. It turns covenant into competition. It poisons your perception. You no longer see brothers and sisters. You see threats. You can't clap for others because their win feels like your loss. But the kingdom doesn't operate like the world. In the kingdom, when one wins, we all rise. In the kingdom, collaboration is more powerful than competition. In the kingdom, there's room for everyone to flourish, just not in the same way or at the same time. One of the most dangerous things about comparison is that it can lead you into premature decisions. You start trying to catch up to someone else's timeline, forgetting that your anointing has its own schedule. You try to build too fast, launch too early, speak before you're ready, move without instruction. Why? Because you're trying to prove you're as called as they are. But the enemy loves that. He loves when you move by pressure instead of purpose, because premature movement leads to unnecessary pain. Let me remind you, your journey is tailor-made, custom, built by the Creator. What's taking longer for you may be because God is building it to last. What seems hidden right now might be growing roots. What feels small might be the seed of something unstoppable. Don't despise the process just because someone else is in their harvest season. Rejoice for them, and keep working your field. You have no idea what someone else had to survive to stand where they stand. You don't know what they cried through, what they bled for, what they lost behind the scenes. You don't know how many nights they almost gave up. So be careful not to envy what you don't fully understand. Focus on stewarding what you are given, because God doesn't reward comparison. He rewards faithfulness. Stay in your lane, run your race. Fix your eyes on the author and finisher of your faith. Don't let the noise of the crowd distract you from the pace of your calling. Someone else's success is not your ceiling. Their elevation doesn't threaten your future. You are not behind, you are not forgotten, you are not overlooked, you are on time. God's time, avoid going there. That inner detour where your joy leaks, your focus blurs, and your confidence breaks. Because comparison doesn't just steal your peace, it steals your clarity. And without clarity, you can't run. Without clarity, you question the very thing you were born to do. But once you break free from that mindset, something shifts. You begin to appreciate your uniqueness. You begin to trust your timing, and you start to walk, not in competition, but in conviction. The sixth place you must avoid going is anywhere God didn't send you. You may feel ready, you may feel gifted, the door might even be wide open, but if the sending wasn't divine, then the journey will be burdensome. Favor follows obedience, not ambition, and obedience means waiting for the command, not just the opportunity. There is a vast difference between a good idea and a God idea. Many people end up exhausted not because they are doing evil, but because they are doing what looks right in the wrong place. The worst detour is not always sin itself, sent movement. You went, but you were never sent, and now you're fighting battles you were never graced to win, in places you were never anointed to stand. Avoid stepping into assignments that were never authorized. Because where God sends, He supplies. Where He places you, He prepares you. When He directs, He defends. But when you place yourself in a season just because it looked attractive, you'll be forced to maintain what you built without His help. That's how burnout begins. That's how resentment grows. That's how delay is introduced. Not because the promise isn't real, but because you rushed the timing or rewrote the map. Too often, we allow pressure to sound like purpose. Just because others expect it doesn't mean God endorsed it. Just because the need is great doesn't mean the calling is yours. Some doors open to test your discernment, not to invite your decision. Some positions are platforms of distraction, dressed up as elevation. And when you chase movement without instruction, you'll arrive in places that look like destiny, but function like bondage. Avoid stepping into roles, ministries, relationships, or locations where God never gave clearance. Because the enemy doesn't mind you being active, as long as you're outside of alignment. He doesn't care if you're loud, visible, or applauded, as long as you're disconnected from direction. The devil will gladly promote you if it keeps you out of position. He'll send you compliments, offers, confirmations, if it pushes you into something God never approved. One of the most subtle forms of rebellion is spiritual impatience, the unwillingness to wait for the instruction because you assume the outcome. But God doesn't bless assumption. He blesses submission. He blesses those who seek, wait, and listen. And in a world that celebrates speed and independence, obedience can feel like delay. But obedience is not delay. It's alignment. And alignment is what keeps your gift from becoming your grave. There are consequences to going where God didn't send you. You begin to operate in places that deplete you instead of develop you. You perform instead of minister. You survive instead of thrive. You get applause but no peace, visibility but no clarity. Because while you may be present in the room, your anointing was meant for another place entirely. And the longer you stay outside of his direction, the more you begin to doubt his voice, because things aren't working the way you thought they would. Avoid confusing motion with mission. Not all movement is forward. You can be very busy and very far from purpose. In fact, the most dangerous place to be is successful in the wrong assignment, because success can make disobedience feel justified. You think it must be right. Look at the results. But results are not always evidence of approval. Sometimes they're just evidence of your effort, but effort can't sustain what only God can build. Moses learned this. When God told him to speak to the rock, but he struck it instead, water still flowed. The miracle happened, but Moses lost access to the promise. That means you can operate outside of God's will and still see temporary fruit. But don't be deceived. Fruit is not the same as favor. Water came for the people, but Moses paid the price. That's what happens when you go beyond what God said. You lose more than time, you lose peace, you lose rhythm, and you risk destiny. God is a sending God. He sends with purpose, precision, and provision. He sent Abraham, Joseph, Esther, Jonah, Paul, and every one of them had to wait for the release. Even Jesus waited until it was his time to begin. He didn't move because of pressure. He didn't act because of potential. He moved when the heavens spoke. And if the Son of God had to be sent, who are we to self-deploy? So ask yourself, have you moved on impulse or instruction? Have you stepped into something because it looked good or because it was ordained? Are you where you're planted or just where you landed? Because there's a big difference. One produces fruit. The other just produces fatigue. Avoid going to the place where God's voice is faint. The place where your ego speaks louder than his spirit. The place where you are more concerned with outcomes than obedience. Because that place may look promising, but it lacks the one thing that truly matters, his presence. And without his presence, even the promised land becomes a wilderness. You don't want to just go, you want to be sent, because where he sends he stays, where he sends he builds, and where he sends you'll find not just purpose, but peace. So now that we've walked through these 6 places, these dangerous inner territories, deceptive distractions, emotional prisons, spiritual detours, I leave you with this final charge: guard your steps. Not every place that feels right is right. Not every open door is divine. Not every thought deserves your agreement. You must become a gatekeeper of your destiny, vigilant in where you allow your feet, your mind, and your heart to go. Avoid going to bitterness. It will rot your roots. Avoid going to offense. It will blind your discernment. Avoid going to isolation. It will shrink your purpose. Avoid going to comparison. It will kill your confidence. Avoid going without being sent. It will drain your strength. Avoid going back to what God delivered you from. It will trap your future. God is not calling you to wander. He's calling you to walk in wisdom. And wisdom says, stop before you step. Pause before you pursue. Pray before you proceed, because every wrong place you avoid brings you closer to the right place he's prepared. Your journey matters too much. Your destiny is too weighty. Your time is too precious, and your calling is too sacred to waste on detours dressed as direction. May you never again go where God is not. May you never again move by pressure, but by purpose. May you discern the traps, avoid the noise, and walk in truth. You are not just called, you are being guided. Listen, obey, and stay in alignment. That is how you win. Avoid going there, because where you go determines what you grow. And what you grow determines what you carry, and what you carry decides what you become. Choose wisely.